The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet suburb of Elmwood Heights, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns and faded picket fences. Emily Harper wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, the humid August air clinging to her skin like a second layer. At 34, she moved through her days with the steady rhythm of someone who'd long ago learned to keep going, no matter the weight. Her small bungalow on Maple Street smelled of fresh basil and simmering garlic, the kitchen windows open to let in the faint hum of lawnmowers and distant children's laughter. It was a sound she cherished, a reminder that life pulsed on, even if hers felt a little stalled. Emily's hands, calloused from years of chopping vegetables and kneading dough, worked methodically as she stirred a pot of marinara sauce. She wasn't a professional chef, not anymore. Those dreams had fizzled out after culinary school when her ex-husband bailed, leaving her with a toddler and a mountain of debt. Now, she scraped by as a freelance recipe tester for local blogs and the occasional catering gig. Her real passion poured into meals for her 8-year-old son, Noah. He was at soccer practice, his cleats probably caked in mud by now, and the house felt emptier without his chatter. Emily glanced at the clock. 5:45 p.m. Time to plate up the extra portion she'd made. Next door lived Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, the woman the neighborhood kids whispered about as the crazy cat lady. Emily had moved in 5 years ago, drawn to the affordable rent and the sense of community in this slice of middle-class America, just outside Chicago. Evelyn was in her late 70s, wiry and sharp-eyed, with silver hair pinned back in a no-nonsense bun. Her yard was a jungle of overgrown roses and wildflowers, and from Emily's kitchen window, you could often see cats slinking through the shadows. Dozens of them, tabbies and calicos and sleek black strays that Evelyn fed with devotion. The neighbors gossiped, "She's hoarding them," or probably allergic to people, not animals. But Emily saw something else. A fierce independence. A woman who'd outlived everyone she loved and refused to fade away. It started innocently enough 6 months back. Emily had been baking bread one rainy evening when Evelyn knocked, her voice muffled through the screen door. "Smells like heaven in there, dear. Mind if I borrow a slice? My pantry's bare as a witch's broom." Emily had laughed, handed over a warm loaf slathered in butter, and watched Evelyn's face light up like a kid's. From there it became a routine. Emily, with her overflowing fridge and love for cooking, would drop off meals. Lasagna one night, chicken pot pie the next. Evelyn paid in stories, sitting on her sagging porch swing with a cup of weak tea, recounting tales of her youth in the city, dancing in jazz clubs during the war years. "Men were simpler then," she'd say, her eyes distant. "But they all turned to dust." Emily didn't mind. It filled the quiet hours, gave her a sense of purpose beyond Noah's school runs and her own loneliness. Her marriage had crumbled under the strain of long hours and unspoken resentments. Her ex, Mark, now lived across town with a younger woman, sending checks that barely covered the bills. Friends had drifted, swallowed by their own lives. Cooking for Evelyn was a small anchor, a way to nurture without the risk of heartbreak. As she ladled the sauce over pasta now, the steam rising in fragrant curls, Emily felt a quiet satisfaction. The Italian herbs she'd grown in her backyard pots mingled with the tang of tomatoes from the farmer's market, a scent that wrapped around her like comfort. She packed the Tupperware carefully, the plastic warm under her fingers, and stepped out into the cooling evening. The air carried the earthy scent of freshly cut grass and the faint metallic tang from the nearby highway. Crickets were starting their chorus, a rhythmic chirp that blended with the rustle of leaves in the oak trees lining the street. Evelyn's house loomed next door, its paint peeling like old skin, the front door flanked by two porcelain cats that stared out with unblinking eyes. Emily knocked, the sound echoing hollowly. The door creaked open after a moment, and Evelyn peered out, her face etched with lines that spoke of sun and sorrow. A ginger cat wove between her ankles, purring softly. Emily, right on time. Come in, come in. Don't let the chill in. Her voice was gravelly, laced with a Midwestern twang that hadn't softened with age. Emily handed over the container, smiling. Chicken cacciatore tonight. Extra veggies for you-know-who. She nodded toward the cat, who eyed the food with lazy interest. Evelyn chuckled, a dry sound like rustling paper. Mittens appreciates it, though she'd rather have the mice I catch in the basement. She led Emily inside, the living room a cozy chaos of faded quilts and bookshelves sagging under volumes of poetry and history. Cats lounged on every surface, 7 visible, their eyes glowing in the dim lamplight. The air was thick with the musty smell of old paper and fur, undercut by the faint citrus of Evelyn's hand soap. They settled at the kitchen table, scarred oak that had seen decades of meals, and Evelyn unpacked the dish, inhaling deeply. You have a gift, girl. Reminds me of my mama's cooking, back when we had a farm upstate. As Evelyn ate, fork scraping against the plate, she grew quieter, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantel. A black and white image of a young woman in a fur coat, arm in arm with a dashing man. Emily had seen it before but never asked. Tonight, though, Evelyn seemed different, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible load. You ever wonder about legacies, Emily? She said suddenly, setting down her fork. What you leave behind when the cats are all that's left? Emily paused, the question hanging in the warm air like smoke. She thought of Noah, his gap-toothed grin, and the empty chair at her own table. Sometimes, I just want him to remember the good parts, you know? The meals, the stories. Evelyn nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the photo frame across the room. Stories are all we have, but some are better left buried. Her voice trailed off, and for a split second, her eyes flickered with something sharp. Fear? Regret? Before Emily could press, Evelyn waved it away. Eat with me. Don't let an old fool ramble. They shared the meal in companionable silence, the clink of silverware and soft meows the only sounds. But as Emily walked home later, the streetlights buzzing to life overhead, that flicker lingered in her mind. Buried stories. What had Evelyn meant? The night air felt cooler now, carrying a whisper of autumn, and Emily locked her door a little tighter than usual, the house settling around her with a creak that sounded almost like a sigh. The next morning dawned with a crisp edge, the kind that snuck into Elmwood Heights after a humid night, turning the air sharp and alive with possibility. Emily woke to the insistent beep of her alarm, her body heavy from a restless sleep. Noah's small form was curled beside her in the queen bed they shared on tough weeks when the AC unit gave out, his breathing steady and soft. She slipped out quietly, padding barefoot across the cool hardwood floors to the kitchen. The house still held the faint aroma of last night's pasta, mingled now with the dew-kissed scent drifting in from the open window. Outside, the neighborhood stirred. A dog barked in the distance, tires crunched on gravel as the paperboy made his rounds, and the first birdsong pierced the quiet. Emily brewed coffee, the rich, dark roast bubbling in the pot with a gurgle that grounded her. Black, no sugar, just the way she liked it, bitter enough to chase away the fog in her mind. Evelyn's words echoed as she sipped, steam curling up to warm her face. Buried stories. It was probably nothing, just the ramblings of an old woman facing her own mortality. But the flicker in Evelyn's eyes had been real, a shadow that didn't match the usual twinkle of mischief. Emily shook it off, focusing on the day ahead. Noah had a school project due, and she had a batch of scones to test for a food blog, Blueberry, with lemon zest for that bright kick. By 7:30, Noah was up, his hair a wild mop as he shoveled cereal into his mouth at the Formica table. "Mom, can we get a cat? Like Mrs. Thorne's? They're cool." His eyes, wide and hopeful, mirrored his father's in a way that always tugged at her. Emily ruffled his hair, forcing a smile. "Maybe when you're older, buddy. We can barely keep the goldfish alive." It was a half-truth. The real reason was the allergies she'd developed after Mark left, or maybe just the fear of more mouths to feed, more hearts to mend. Noah shrugged, grabbing his backpack, and they headed out together, the screen door slapping shut behind them. The walk to the bus stop was short, past Evelyn's house where the cats were already prowling the porch, their fur dappled in the slanting sunlight. One, a sleek Siamese, watched them with emerald eyes, tail flicking lazily. Emily waved at the window, but no face appeared. Odd, but not alarming. Evelyn kept her own hours, rising with the roosters she swore she heard from the farm in her dreams. Work filled the morning. Emily in her kitchen, flour dusting her apron like fresh snow, the oven's heat radiating against her cheeks as she pulled out golden scones. The texture was perfect, crumbly yet tender, the berries bursting with juice that stained her fingers purple. She snapped photos for the blog, typed notes on a laptop balanced on the counter, the keys clicking rhythmically. By noon, her phone buzzed with an email. A small catering order for a neighborhood barbecue next weekend. It wasn't much, $50 for salads and dips, but it meant groceries, maybe a new pair of sneakers for Noah. Lunch was a quick turkey sandwich, eaten standing up, the bread soft and the mustard sharp on her tongue. She glanced at the clock, 1 p.m. Habit made her check on Evelyn. The old woman sometimes forgot her meds, or so she'd mentioned once. Grabbing a leftover scone wrapped in foil, Emily stepped next door. The yard felt wilder today, roses tangling over the path like they were reclaiming the space. She knocked, the wood vibrating under her knuckles, but silence answered. Knocking again. Harder. She called out, "Evelyn? It's Emily. Brought you something sweet." Nothing. A prickle ran up her spine, the kind you get when a room goes too quiet. She tried the door, unlocked as always. Evelyn's trust in the world was one of her quirks. "Hello." Emily pushed inside, the hinges groaning like an old man's complaint. The living room was dim, curtains drawn against the midday glare. The air thicker than yesterday, laced with that same musty fur but undercut by something else. Stale, like unwashed dishes left too long. Cats scattered at her entrance. A calico darting under the couch with a hiss. Another leaping to the windowsill. "Evelyn." Emily's voice echoed off the walls, her heart picking up tempo. The kitchen table still held last night's plate. Crusts of pasta hardened around the edges. Flies buzzing lazily. Uneaten. That wasn't like her. Worry coiled in Emily's gut as she moved deeper, past the cluttered mantel where the photo stood sentinel. Footsteps creaked from the hallway, soft, tentative. Evelyn emerged from her bedroom, leaning on a cane Emily hadn't seen before, her face pale and drawn, hair askew. "Emily? What? Oh dear, you startled me." Her voice was thinner, frayed at the edges. Relief flooded Emily, warm and sudden. "I knocked. You okay? Thought maybe you needed company." She held out the scone, but Evelyn waved it away, sinking into her armchair with a sigh that seemed to deflate her. Just a bad night. Dreams, you know? The kind that drag you under. Evelyn's eyes, usually sharp, were dull, shadowed by dark circles. A cat, the Ginger from before, curled in her lap, purring as if to soothe. But Evelyn's hand trembled on its fur, and she didn't meet Emily's gaze. Emily knelt beside the chair, the worn fabric rough against her knee. "You sure? That cacciatore's still sitting there. Want me to heat it up?" Evelyn shook her head, fingers tightening on the cane. "No appetite. Listen, Emily, about last night. The stories. Forget I said anything. Some things are best left in the dark." Her tone sharpened, a warning wrapped in weariness. But Emily couldn't let it go, the curiosity gnawing like an itch. "You looked scared. If something's wrong." "It's nothing," Evelyn snapped, then softened, regret flashing across her face. "Just old ghosts. My sister. She passed years ago, but sometimes I hear her voice. Silly, isn't it?" She forced a laugh, but it rang hollow, like wind through empty branches. Emily nodded, though doubt lingered. Sisters? Evelyn had never mentioned family. As she helped tidy the kitchen, rinsing the plate under cool water that smelled faintly of iron from old pipes, questions bubbled up. Who was the woman in the photo? Why the sudden edge? Evelyn watched her work, silent now, the clock ticking loudly on the wall. Back home by mid-afternoon, Emily's mind raced. She prepped dinner. Grilled cheese for Noah, the bread toasting golden in the skillet, cheese oozing with a sizzle that filled the air with comfort. But as she plated it, her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered, wiping butter from her hands. "Ms. Harper? This is Detective Ruiz from the Elmwood PD." The voice was calm, professional, with a faint Chicago accent. "We're following up on a welfare check for your neighbor, Evelyn Thorne. Mind if we stop by tomorrow?" Emily's stomach dropped, the sandwich turning to ash in her mouth. "Welfare check? What happened? Is she okay?" "Just routine. See you at 10. The line clicked dead, leaving only the hum of the fridge and the distant roar of a passing truck. Noah bounded in then, chattering about school, but Emily barely heard him. Buried stories, indeed. What had Evelyn hidden that now drew the police? The evening light faded outside, casting the kitchen in amber, and for the first time in years, Emily felt the suburbs quiet as a veil, thin and trembling. The night stretched long for Emily, the kind where shadows in the hallway seemed to shift just out of sight. Noah's bedtime stories, usually tales of pirates and hidden treasures, felt rote as she read, her voice steady but her mind adrift. He conked out mid-page, his small chest rising and falling under the dinosaur print comforter, oblivious to the knot twisting in her stomach. She tucked the book away, the pages whispering against the nightstand, and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. The tap ran cold, splashing against the sink's porcelain with a metallic echo that matched the unease humming in her veins. Outside, the suburb had gone still, save for the occasional whoosh of a car on the main drag and the persistent chirp of crickets, like a chorus mocking her worry. She replayed the detective's call in her head, the clipped efficiency of his words. Welfare check. Routine, he'd said, but nothing about police felt routine. Evelyn's face from that afternoon, pale, evasive, flashed back, those trembling hands on the cane. Old ghosts, she'd called them. Emily leaned against the counter, the formica cool and sticky under her palms from lunch residue she hadn't wiped clean. What ghosts haunted a woman who'd seemed so unbreakable? The photo on the mantel nagged at her, that young couple frozen in time. Sisters, Evelyn had said, but the lie hung there, unspoken. Emily drained her glass, the water tasting faintly of chlorine from the city pipes, and glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m. Sleep wouldn't come easy. Morning arrived with a gray drizzle pattering against the windows, turning the world outside into a blurred watercolor of green lawns and gray roofs. Emily stirred oatmeal on the stove, the oats bubbling thickly with a wooden spoon's rhythmic scrape. Cinnamon dusted the air, warm and spicy, a small rebellion against the chill seeping through the cracks. Noah shoveled his breakfast, milk dribbling down his chin as he chattered about a playground adventure. But Emily's responses were half-hearted, her eyes flicking to the wall clock every few minutes. 9:45. She wiped the counters with a damp cloth, the scent of lemon cleaner cutting through the sweetness, trying to impose order on the chaos in her thoughts. At exactly 10 a.m., a knock rattled the door, firm, authoritative. Emily smoothed her hair, still damp from a quick shower, and opened it to find Detective Ruiz on the step. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered with a neatly trimmed mustache and eyes that scanned her face like he was cataloging details. Rain beaded on his dark jacket, dripping onto the welcome mat. Behind him, a female officer stood, notepad in hand, her expression neutral under a slicker hood. "Ms. Harper? Thanks for seeing us." Ruiz's voice carried that same calm accent, softened by the rain's steady drum. He stepped inside when she gestured, his boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum. The house suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker with the intrusion of strangers. They settled at the kitchen table, the officer's presence making the space feel official, like a deposition. Emily poured coffee, black for Ruiz with cream for the officer, whose name tag read Sergeant Patel. The mugs clinking against the wood. Steam rose in lazy spirals, carrying the rich, nutty aroma that usually comforted her but now just underscored the tension. "We're here about Evelyn Thorne," Ruiz began, flipping open a small notebook. His pen scratched faintly, a sound like nails on chalk. "You know her well?" Emily nodded, wrapping her hands around her own mug for warmth. The ceramic was hot, almost burning, but she welcomed the distraction. "As well as anyone, I guess. I bring her meals sometimes. She's particular but kind." "Why the welfare check?" Patel leaned forward, her dark hair escaping the hood in frizzy strands. "Anonymous tip. Neighbor reported she hasn't been seen much lately. Erratic behavior, they said. Cats everywhere. Mail piling up." Her tone was matter-of-fact, but there was an undercurrent of concern, like she was gauging Emily's reaction. Emily's pulse quickened, the drizzle outside intensifying to a soft roar on the roof. Erratic? Like what? She thought of Evelyn's sharp snap yesterday, the uneaten plate. But mail piling up? Evelyn paid her bills on time, or so she'd boasted once, with a wink about outsmarting the taxman. Ruiz sipped his coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness. Calls to animal control, complaints about noise at odd hours. And this. He slid a photo across the table, a grainy printout from a security cam, timestamped 2 nights ago. It showed Evelyn's front yard at midnight, her silhouette hunched over something in the dirt, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark like a blade. Cats milled around her feet, eyes reflecting the light in eerie pinpricks. Emily's breath caught, the image blurring in her vision. What is she doing? Couldn't say. Digging, maybe. We knocked yesterday, But no answer. Ruiz's eyes met hers, steady and probing. You notice anything off? Visitors? Arguments? She hesitated, the steam from the mugs fogging the air between them. The oatmeal had cooled untouched on the stove, its scent now cloying. Evelyn's words echoed. Some things best left in the dark. She mentioned her sister last night, said she hears her voice sometimes. But she's old, you know? Memories play tricks. Patel's pen paused. Sister? Records show Evelyn's an only child. Parents deceased. No siblings. The revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through Emily's chest. Only child. The photo on the mantel, the woman in the fur coat. Not a sister. A lie or something deeper. Emily's mouth went dry, the coffee turning sour on her tongue. Maybe she meant a friend. Or, I don't know. Ruiz closed his notebook with a snap that echoed too loudly. Appreciate the time. If you see anything, calls, odd deliveries, let us know. He handed her a card, the paper crisp and embossed. Then they rose, the chairs scraping back with finality. As they stepped out into the rain, Patel turned. Take care of yourself, Miss Harper. Neighbors like that, they pull you in deep. The door clicked shut, leaving Emily alone with the damp chill and the fading scent of their coffee. She stared at the card, her fingers trembling slightly, the ink smudging under a raindrop that had trailed in. Deep. Yeah. She crossed to the window, peering through the shears at Evelyn's house. The curtains were still drawn, but now a flicker of movement. A shadow passing behind the glass? Or just the rain playing tricks? Noah's bus pulled up outside, honking once, and she forced herself to wave him off, her smile brittle. The afternoon dragged, filled with mechanical tasks. Folding laundry that smelled of dryer sheets and faint sweat, scrubbing the tub until her knuckles pruned under the hot water's sting. But her mind circled back to the photo, the digging, the lie about a sister. By evening, curiosity burned hotter than worry. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples, Emily plated a simple casserole, layers of ground beef, cheese melting gooey and golden under the broiler's heat, and headed next door. The rain had eased to a mist, beating on her jacket like tiny jewels, the air fresh and loamy from the earth. Evelyn's porch light buzzed faintly, casting a yellow pool over the steps. Emily knocked, the sound muffled by the damp wood. Footsteps shuffled inside, slow and labored, and the door cracked open. Evelyn's face appeared, gaunt in the dim light, her eyes widening fractionally. Emily, didn't expect you. No invitation this time, just a wary grip on the doorframe, knuckles white. I brought food. And the police stopped by. Emily held out the dish, steam escaping the lid in a warm puff that cut the chill. Welfare check. What's going on, Evelyn? The old woman's lips thinned, a muscle twitching in her jaw. Behind her, the house was darker than usual, Cat's eyes glowing like embers from the gloom. Police? Nosy fools. Nothing to see here. But her voice cracked, betraying the steel she tried to muster. Emily pushed gently, stepping over the threshold before Evelyn could protest. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of wet fur and something sharper. Mothballs, maybe, or old cedar from the attic. They showed me a picture. You in the yard at night, digging. Evelyn's cane tapped once against the floor, sharp as a warning. She closed the door with a soft thud, turning to face Emily in the narrow hall. Mind your own, girl. Some holes are meant to stay filled. Her eyes, fever bright, darted to a door at the end of the hall, closed, with a faint scratch from within, like nails on wood. Emily's heart thudded, the casserole warm and heavy in her hands. Holes, buried stories. The weight of it all pressed down, the mist outside forgotten as the house seemed to close in, secrets whispering from the walls. What lay behind that door? And why did Evelyn look like a woman guarding a grave? Emily's grip tightened on the casserole dish, the heat seeping through the oven mitts and into her palms, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in her bones. The hallway felt narrower now, the walls papered in faded florals that peeled at the edges like old wounds, closing in with the weight of Evelyn's stare. The scratch from behind the door came again, subtle, insistent, like a branch tapping glass in the wind, but deeper, more rhythmic. Emily's eyes flicked toward it, her pulse echoing the sound in her ears. "Evelyn, please. You're scaring me." She set the dish on a side table cluttered with dusty knickknacks. A porcelain figurine of a cat mid-leap, its paint chipped, and peeled off the mitts, her fingers flexing against the sudden cool air. The scent from the casserole mingled with the house's heavier notes. Damp wood, lingering spices from meals past, and that underlying sharpness, like vinegar left to sour. Evelyn leaned heavier on her cane, the tip digging into the threadbare runner with a soft thud. Her nightgown hung loose on her frame, the cotton thin and yellowed, brushing against her calves as she shifted. "Scaring you? Child, you've no idea what real fear tastes like." Her voice dropped, gravelly and edged with something raw, like she'd swallowed glass. She glanced at the door again, her free hand fluttering to her throat, where a silver locket dangled, catching the faint light from a single bulb overhead. "Go home, Emily. Eat your supper with that boy of yours. Leave the dead to rest." But Emily didn't move. The detective's words clawed at her. Only child, no siblings. And the photo burned in her memory, that smiling couple under the fur coat, their faces too intimate for mere friends. "The police think something's wrong. That picture. You were out there in the middle of the night. If you're in trouble, I can help. Noah's at a friend's. We could call someone." Evelyn's laugh was brittle, scraping the air like dry leaves underfoot. "Help? From a girl who burns toast on a bad day." She straightened a fraction, but her eyes betrayed her, darting back to the door as the scratching paused, then resumed, faint, almost pleading. "A cat? No, too deliberate, too human in its desperation." Evelyn's face crumpled for a heartbeat, lines deepening like cracks in parched earth, before she masked it with a scowl. "Fine. You want truth? Sit." She gestured to a sagging armchair in the living room, the fabric worn to a shine from years of use, and shuffled ahead, her cane marking time like a metronome. Emily followed, the floorboards groaning under her sneakers, each step releasing puffs of dust that danced in the dim light. The room was a tomb of memories. Shelves bowed under photo albums with cracked spines, a rocking chair still in the corner where Evelyn must have spent long nights, and more cats. 3 now, curled on the hearth, their fur matted and eyes half-lidded in the gloom. 1, a tabby with a notched ear, watched Emily with unblinking yellow eyes, its tail flicking like a warning flag. The air here was thicker, laced with the faint, acrid tang of urine from hidden corners, but undercut by the sweet rot of forgotten fruit in a bowl on the coffee table. Evelyn eased into the opposite chair, the springs creaking in protest, and steepled her hands over the cane. "That door. It's to the basement. My workshop once. Now it's where I keep my regrets." Her voice softened, the Midwestern twang thickening with emotion, like molasses pulled from a cold jar. "The woman in the photo, her name was Clara. Not my sister. My daughter. Emily's breath hitched, the word landing like a punch to the gut. Daughter. Evelyn had never spoken of children, only the cats as her babies. Her family scattered to the winds. She leaned forward, the armchair's armrest rough and splintery under her elbows. You have a daughter? Where is she? Does she know about this? She waved vaguely at the house, the cats, the peeling walls. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the window, where rain-smeared glass blurred the neighbor's porch light into a hazy glow. Outside, the mist had thickened, muffling the distant hum of traffic on the highway, turning the world into a cocoon of secrets. Clara was wild, like the roses out front, born in '52 right after the war. We lived in the city then, me waitressing at a diner on Michigan Avenue, her father, well, he was a ghost before she even knew him. Evelyn's fingers traced the locket, popping it open with a click that echoed too sharply. Inside, a tiny curl of dark hair, faded now to brown. She ran off at 16, chased dreams bigger than this town could hold. Letters at first, full of promise, Hollywood, New York, places that glittered in her mind. Then nothing. 30 years of nothing. Emily's throat tightened, empathy twisting with the growing knot of unease. She thought of Noah, his small hand in hers at the bus stop, the way he'd cling if she ever vanished. Did you look for her? The police. Police. Evelyn's eyes snapped back, fierce now, the dullness burned away by a fire long banked. They wrote her off as a runaway, one of thousands. I searched on my own, buses to the coast, ads in papers that yellowed unread. Found traces. A job in LA as a waitress, like me, a marriage that fizzled. But she slipped away, always one step ahead. The scratching from the basement swelled briefly, a frantic scrape that made both women freeze. Evelyn's jaw clenched, her knuckles whitening on the cane. Until last month. A letter came. No return address, just her handwriting, shaky as a drunk's. Said she was coming home. Sick, maybe dying. Needed me. The revelation hung in the air, heavy as the humid mist outside, and Emily's mind reeled. A daughter, returned after decades? That explained the pallor, the uneaten meals, the midnight digging. Perhaps burying old letters or mementos to make space for the prodigal. But the lie about the sister, the wariness, where is she now? Upstairs. Evelyn shook her head, slow and deliberate, her silver hair slipping from its bun to curtain one eye. Down there, in the basement. She arrived 2 weeks ago, half out of her mind. Fever, cough that rattles like gravel. Cats sensed it first. They won't leave her side. The scratching peaked, then fell silent, leaving only the tick of the mantel clock and the soft patter of rain. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper, laced with shame. I couldn't take her to a doctor. No insurance, no papers after all these years. She's changed her name, her life. If they find out, they'll take her away again. Deport her, maybe. She married some drifter who took her south of the border once. Emily's heart pounded, the pieces slotting into a darker picture. Not ghosts, but a living secret hidden away like contraband. The welfare calls, the digging. Perhaps Evelyn had been burying evidence of Clara's arrival, old IDs or letters to keep the authorities at bay. You can't keep her like this. She needs help. Let me call someone. A clinic, anonymously. No! Evelyn surged forward, the cane clattering to the floor with a hollow ring. Her face twisted, veins standing out on her neck like blue rivers under thin skin. You think I haven't thought of that? One wrong word and it's all gone. She's my blood, Emily. The only piece left. Tears welled, unbidden, tracing salty paths down her cheeks, and she swiped them away with a trembling hand. The cat stirred, one leaping to her lap with a low meow, its fur warm and vibrating against her. Emily rose, her legs unsteady, the room spinning slightly from the weight of it all. Compassion warred with fear. The basement door loomed in her mind, that scratching a siren's call to something broken and desperate. Okay, I won't say anything, but promise me you'll let me bring supplies, medicine, food. For both of you. She retrieved the cane, handing it back, the wood smooth and worn from endless use. Evelyn nodded, deflating back into the chair, the fight leaching out like air from a punctured tire. Tomorrow, quiet-like. And Emily, thank you. For the meals. For seeing me. Her voice cracked on the last word, raw and vulnerable. The crazy cat lady, facade shattered in the dim light. Emily slipped out into the night, the door clicking shut behind her with finality. The mist clung to her skin, cool droplets beating on her lashes, the casserole forgotten on the table. Her house next door felt alien now, its lights a false beacon of normalcy. As she unlocked the door, the scent of cooling dinner greeted her. Cheese and beef, comforting yet distant. Noah was due back soon, his laughter a lifeline she clung to. But downstairs, in the shadows next door, a woman coughed faintly through the walls, a sound that burrowed into Emily's dreams that night, unanswered questions multiplying like the cats in the dark. The complication twisted deeper as days blurred. Emily smuggled broth and antibiotics bought with cash from her catering gig, the bottles clinking softly in her bag like guilty secrets. Evelyn's stories shifted, weaving Clara into the tapestry. Tales of a girl with pigtails stealing cookies, now a shadow fighting for breath. Tension built in stolen glances, the neighborhood's whispers growing louder. More complaints about the cat's yowls at night, the mail truck idling longer outside Evelyn's box. Emily's sleep fractured, haunted by the scratching, the fear that one slip could unravel everything. And then, on a Thursday morning, as she stirred eggs in her skillet, the sizzle masking her racing thoughts, a new van pulled up next door, sleek, black with tinted windows. For men in suits emerged, briefcases in hand, their faces stern under the overcast sky. Tourneys. The word hit like a storm warning, escalating the stakes into something irreversible. What had Clara or Evelyn done to summon them now? Emily stood frozen at the stove, the spatula hovering over the pan as the eggs hissed and popped, their edges crisping to a golden brown that she barely registered. The kitchen window framed the scene next door like an unwelcome movie. The black van's door sliding shut with a metallic thunk, the four men stepping onto Evelyn's cracked driveway in unison, their polished shoes crunching against the gravel. They were sharp-edged, city types, ties knotted tight against the humid air, briefcases swinging like pendulums. One carried a leather folder under his arm. Another adjusted his cufflinks with a flick that caught the weak morning light filtering through the clouds. Tourneys. The realization settled in her gut like cold lead, heavier than the secret broth she'd slipped Evelyn last night, the liquid sloshing faintly in the fridge behind her now. She turned off the burner with a click, the sudden silence amplifying the low rumble of the van's engine idling. Noah was still asleep, his door cracked open down the hall, the faint rhythm of his breathing a fragile anchor. Emily wiped her hands on a dish towel, the cotton rough and damp from last night's dishes, and edged closer to the window. The mist from the previous days had lifted, leaving the air thick and still, carrying the sharp scent of wet earth and distant exhaust from the highway. One of the men, tall, with salt and pepper hair and a jaw like carved granite, knocked on Evelyn's door, the sound sharp even from here, 3 raps that echoed off the peeling siding. The door opened a sliver, Evelyn's silhouette appearing like a shadow puppet against the dim interior. Her voice carried faintly, muffled but urgent. "What do you want? I told you on the phone, no." The men murmured in response, low and insistent, their words lost to the breeze rustling the oak leaves overhead. Evelyn's cane appeared in the crack, tapping once like a punctuation mark, and then the door swung wider. They filed in, the last one pulling it shut with a decisive click that made Emily flinch. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments. Clara's letter, the hidden illness, the basement door with its ceaseless scratching now silent in the daylight. Had Evelyn reached out to these men? Lawyers for what, wills, estates, or something uglier like covering tracks for an undocumented return? Emily's palms grew slick, the towel twisting in her grip until the fibers bit into her skin. She thought of the antibiotics she'd bought at the corner pharmacy, the cashier's indifferent nod as she paid in crumpled 20s. No questions asked. Helping had felt right, a quiet act of neighborly grace, but now it twisted into complicity, a thread pulling her deeper into whatever web Evelyn had spun. The eggs cooled on the plate, congealing into pale yellow curds that she pushed aside, appetite gone. She poured coffee instead, the pot gurgling its last drops into the mug with a bitter, acrid steam that stung her eyes. Sipping it black, she paced the linoleum, the cool tiles grounding her bare feet amid the rising panic. Outside, the van sat like a sentinel, its tinted windows reflecting the gray sky and her own distorted face peering back, wide-eyed, uncertain. What if Clara's condition had worsened? The coughs Emily had glimpsed through the floorboards during one midnight delivery, wet and ragged, like drowning from the inside. Or worse, what if the attorneys were from the other side, creditors or officials sniffing out the lies? By the time Noah shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled and his hair a cowlicked mess, Emily had forced a smile, plating the eggs with mechanical precision. "Morning, buddy. Scrambled with cheese, your favorite." The words tasted false, but he dove in, fork scraping the ceramic with enthusiastic clinks, oblivious to the storm brewing next door. "Mom, can I play outside after school? The ground's all squishy from the rain." "Sure, just stay close." She ruffled his hair, the strands soft and warm under her fingers, a momentary balm against the knot in her chest. But as she drove him to school, the old Civic's engine coughing to life, the dashboard clock ticking past 8:15, her eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. The van was still there, unmoving, its presence a dark smudge in the suburban tableau of minivans and recycling bins. Work that morning blurred into distraction. She tested a new soup recipe for the blog, carrots and ginger simmering in a pot that bubbled with an earthy sweetness, the knife's rhythmic chop against the cutting board a futile attempt at focus. But her thoughts circled the attorney's briefcases, imagining documents stamped with red ink, eviction notices, health orders, or worse, questions about a long-lost daughter resurfacing like a ghost. The steam from the stove fogged the window, blurring the view next door, but she could hear voices now, raised faintly through the shared wall. Evelyn's gravelly protest cutting through a smoother baritone, words like trust and inheritance drifting like smoke. By noon, the van was gone, but the air felt charged, the sky pressing down with heavier clouds that threatened more rain. Emily couldn't wait any longer. She packed a thermos of the soup, hot, nourishing, with chunks of potato that softened in the broth, and crossed the yard, her sneakers sinking into the damp grass, releasing the green, loamy scent of soil. Evelyn's door was ajar, a sliver of shadow inviting her in, the porch swing creaking gently in the wind. She knocked anyway, the wood vibrating under her knuckles. "Evelyn? It's me. Come in, if you must." The voice was weary, stripped of its usual bite, emanating from the living room where sunlight slanted through half-drawn curtains, dust motes dancing like fireflies in the beams. Evelyn sat in her armchair, the cane propped beside her like a sentinel, her face ashen and lined deeper than before. The cats were subdued, two curled at her feet, their fur rising and falling with shallow breaths. No sign of the men, but the air held a new tang, cologne, sharp and synthetic, overlaying the familiar mustiness. Emily set the thermos on the coffee table, unscrewing the lid to release a puff of steam that carried the soup's warmth, mingling with the room's staleness. What was that about? The van, those men. They looked official. Evelyn's eyes, red-rimmed, met hers with a mix of defiance and defeat. She adjusted the locket at her throat, the metal warm from her skin. Lawyers. From the city. Clara. She had a life out there, tangled in debts and bad choices. Before she came back, she must have reached out, thinking I could fix it. Her fingers drummed the armrest, nails yellowed and uneven. They say there's a will property, some cabin up north she inherited from that drifter husband. But it's complicated. Leans questions about her status. If they dig, they'll find her here. The basement door loomed in Emily's peripheral vision, closed but not locked, a faint cough echoing from below. Clara, alive and fragile, the sound wet and labored, like lungs filled with silt. Emily knelt, the carpet rough against her knees, and touched Evelyn's arm, the skin papery and cool. "Let me help. Call a doctor or at least tell them the truth. Hiding her won't make it go away." Evelyn pulled away, her gaze hardening. "Truth? The truth is I buried her once, in my heart, and now she's back, dragging it all up. Those attorneys, they're sharks circling for a cut. If word gets out about her condition, immigration, the cats, they'll take everything." Her voice cracked, the words spilling like the soup's steam, hot and uncontrollable. A cat meowed plaintively, weaving between them, its tail brushing Emily's leg with a soft, insistent pressure. Emily's resolve wavered, the moral weight pressing down, the choice between loyalty to a neighbor's secret and the risk to a dying woman. She thought of Noah, safe at school, drawing pictures of cats and superheroes, his world untainted. What if they come back? What then? Evelyn leaned forward, her breath sour with unbrushed teeth and worry. "Then we fight. But you, stay out of it, Emily. For your boy's sake." The warning hung, laced with the cough from below, now joined by a weak murmur. Clara's voice? Calling for water or mother. The uncertainty gnawed, a hook pulling Emily deeper. The attorney's visit not an end, but the spark to a fire that could consume them all. As she left, the door clicking shut behind her, the clouds finally broke, rain pattering against the roof like impatient fingers. Emily hurried home, the soup's warmth fading in her hands, her mind a whirlwind of dilemmas. The suburb felt smaller, secrets festering beneath the surface, and she wondered how long until the next knock shattered the fragile peace. The rain hammered down in relentless sheets, turning the backyard into a muddy slurry that sucked at Emily's sneakers as she dashed from Evelyn's porch to her own. Water streamed off the eaves, pooling in the divots of the uneven patio stones, and she slammed the door behind her, breathless, her jacket sodden and heavy against her shoulders. The kitchen light flickered on with a switch's click, casting harsh shadows across the counters still dusted with ginger from the morning's soup. She peeled off the wet layers, the fabric slapping wetly into the sink, releasing a briny scent mixed with the faint, lingering earthiness of the broth she'd left behind. Her hands shook as she dried them on a frayed towel, the threads rough like sandpaper, but it was the echo of that cough, Clara's, ragged and insistent, that chilled her more than the downpour. Noah wouldn't be home for hours, his school day stretching until 3, but the empty house amplified every creak, every drip from the faucet she hadn't fully tightened. Emily paced to the window, wiping steam from the glass with her sleeve, the cloth leaving a smeary trail. Evelyn's house stood dark and sodden across the fence, the attorneys been long gone, but their presence lingered like an afterimage burned into her retinas. Sharks, Evelyn had called them, and Emily could picture it. Sleek suits hiding sharp teeth, circling a woman who'd already lost so much. What debts? What cabin? The fragments Evelyn had shared painted a picture of a life unraveled. Clara's wandering south, a marriage to a man who sounded more phantom than flesh, properties tangled in legal knots. But why now, with Clara hidden away, feverish and fading? Had the letter to Evelyn been a cry for more than shelter, a plea to untangle the past before it claimed her? Emily's coffee from breakfast sat cold on the counter, the mug ringed with a brownish stain, and she dumped it out, the liquid swirling down the drain with a gurgle that matched the turmoil in her gut. She couldn't just stand by. The moral itch had burrowed too deep, scratching at her conscience like Clara's nails on the basement door. Grabbing her keys from the hook by the door, the metal jangling like alarm bells, she hesitated, glancing at Noah's backpack slumped in the hall, its zipper half open to reveal a crumpled drawing of a cat with superhero cape. For his sake, Evelyn had warned. But what kind of mother would she be if she ignored a life slipping away next door? The rain eased to a drizzle as she stepped out, the air heavy with petrichor, that clean, mineral tang of soaked soil, and she crossed to her car, the Civic's door protesting with a rusty squeak. The drive to the library downtown took 20 minutes, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the windshield, smearing the gray world into abstract streaks. Elmwood Heights faded into the busier arteries of the city, strip malls blurring past with neon signs flickering through the haze, coffee shops, laundromats, the kind of places where secrets fermented in anonymity. Emily parked in the lot behind the public library, a squat brick building with rain gutters overflowing like silver veins, and dashed inside, the automatic doors whooshing open to release a blast of conditioned air that smelled of old books and printer ink. Her sneakers squelched on the linoleum, drawing a few glances from patrons hunched over computers, their faces illuminated by blue screens in the dim stacks. She settled at a terminal in the back, the plastic chair cold and sticky under her damp jeans, and typed Evelyn Thorne's name into the search bar, her fingers hovering before committing. The screen loaded slowly, the fan whirring faintly, and results popped up. Property records from the 70s, a marriage certificate to a long-dead mechanic named Harlan, obits for distant cousins. Nothing on Clara, not publicly at least. But digging deeper, under variations like Clara Voss, from Evelyn's offhand mention of the drifter's last name, Emily hit pay dirt. A news clipping from 5 years back, yellowed in digital form, missing heiress sought in cross-border fraud case. Clara Voss, née Thorne, accused of skipping out on a real estate scam involving a lakeside cabin in Wisconsin. Ties to Mexican developers, debts piling up like storm clouds. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. The same face from Evelyn's mantle, older now, hollow-cheeked with haunted eyes, wanted for questioning in a scheme that had bilked investors out of thousands. Emily's breath fogged the monitor, her heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Fraud. Not just debts, criminal. Clara hadn't run from dreams. She'd fled consequences, circling back to her mother as a last harbor. The attorneys weren't saviors. They were hunters, perhaps representing those cheated, or the feds tying up loose ends. And if Clara was here, undocumented, sick, one cough reported, one welfare check escalated, and the basement secret would explode. Emily printed the article, the machine humming and spitting paper with a dry rasp, the ink still warm and smudged under her fingers as she folded it into her pocket. The library's quiet pressed in, broken only by the page turn of a nearby reader and the distant cough of an elderly man, eerie mirroring Clara's. Back home by early afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the street glistening under a pallid sun that did little to warm the chill in her bones. She found a note from the neighbor kid who'd watched Noah briefly after school. "He's at the park. Back soon." Relief mixed with fresh anxiety. She couldn't tell him yet, not until she confronted Evelyn. The casserole from last night sat uneaten in the fridge, cheese congealed and unappetizing. But she reheated a portion anyway. The microwave's beep piercing the silence as steam filled the air with reheated beef and tomato. Footsteps on the porch. Evelyn? No, Noah bursting in, cheeks flushed, grass stains on his knees, the scent of playground dirt clinging to him like a badge. "Mom, I scored a goal today. Wanna hear?" His grin split wide, gap-toothed and pure, and Emily pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his hair that smelled of sweat and innocence. "Tell me everything," she murmured, plating the food with trembling hands, the fork clinking against ceramic. But as he chattered, words tumbling over bites of gooey casserole, the texture stringy now, but he didn't notice. Her mind drifted to the folded paper in her pocket, burning like contraband. Dusk crept in early, the sky bruising to indigo as Emily waited until Noah was bathed and tucked in, his eyelids drooping over a chapter book about lost treasures. The house settled with a sigh, floorboards popping in the cooling air, and she slipped next door again, the printed article clutched like a talisman. Evelyn's door opened on the second knock, the old woman silhouetted in the lamplight, her face etched with fresh lines, the locket glinting at her throat. "You again." Evelyn's voice was a rasp, but she stepped aside, the cane scraping the threshold. The living room felt smaller, cats more restless. One paced the rug with agitated twitches, another yowled softly from the hall. The air was thicker, laced with the metallic tang of medicine Emily had smuggled, and beneath it, the sour edge of illness seeping up from below. Emily thrust the paper forward, her arm steady despite the quake in her chest. "I found this. Clara Voss. Fraud? Evelyn, this is bigger than hiding her. Those attorneys, they're not here for a will. What aren't you telling me?" Evelyn's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits, snatching the page with a hand that trembled. She scanned it, lips moving silently, the paper crinkling under her grip. "Fool girl, digging where you shouldn't." She crumpled it, tossing it into the cold hearth where it landed like a dead leaf. The scratching resumed from the basement, frantic now, joined by a muffled sob that twisted Emily's gut. Clara, aware, pleading. "Tell me the truth," Emily pressed, her voice low, urgent, the words tasting of fear and resolve. "Or I walk out and call them myself. For her sake." Evelyn sank into the chair, the springs groaning, her defiance cracking like thin ice. The cabin, It was his, the drifter's. Clara helped sell it off, fraud they called it, but it was survival. She took the fall to protect him, ran south, built a life on lies. Now he's dead, and the debts circle back. Those men, they're from the victims wanting blood or money. If they find her here, it's prison for her, ruin for me. Tears carved paths down her cheeks, unheeded, and she clutched the locket like a lifeline. She's all I have left. But the fever, it's tuberculosis, they think. Contagious. One doctor, and it's quarantine exposure. The revelation hit like the rain's earlier fury, Emily staggering back a step, the carpet muffling her retreat. Tuberculosis, airborne, deadly if untreated, the cat's unwitting vectors in the close air. Exposure. Noah's laughter from hours ago echoed in her mind, his small lungs breathing the shared yard's air. The hook sank deeper. Not just legal sharks, but a plague hidden in the walls, her own family at risk. She backed toward the door, the sob from below pulling at her like a current. The choice now a razor. Expose it all, or bury the secret deeper, damning them both? The night outside whispered promises of more storms, and Emily fled into it, the door slamming like a verdict, her world tilting on the edge of irreversible fall. Emily bolted through the drizzle-slicked grass, her breath coming in sharp bursts that fogged the night air, the chill seeping through her thin sweater like icy fingers. The door to her house loomed ahead, a rectangle of warm yellow light spilling from the kitchen window, but it felt miles away, the yard stretching endlessly under the bruised sky. Her sneakers squelched in the mud, each step pulling at her ankles with a wet suck, and she fumbled the keys from her pocket, the metal slick and cold against her palm. The lock clicked too loudly, echoing her pounding heart, and she tumbled inside, slamming the barrier between her and the shadows next door. The house enveloped her in its familiar sense. Leftover casserole warming faintly in the oven she'd forgotten to turn off. The subtle vanilla from Noah's bedtime lotion clinging to the air, but nothing could dispel the sour tang of fear lodged in her throat. Tuberculosis. The word ricocheted in her mind, clinical and terrifying, conjuring images of quarantined wards and masked faces from old movies, now horrifyingly real. Clara's cough, that wet rasp she'd dismissed as a cold, could be floating on the breeze, invisible tendrils snaking through the fence slats into her own vents. Noah, with his endless energy and unscarred lungs, playing just yards from the basement window where the disease festered. She leaned against the door, the wood cool and unyielding against her back, and slid to the floor, knees drawn up, the linoleum hard and unforgiving beneath her. Tears pricked hot at her eyes, blurring the hallway where Noah's sneakers lay discarded, small and scuffed from playground wars. How deep had she waded into this? Cooking meals had been simple, a kindness laced with her own loneliness. But now it was a chain binding her to lies and peril. Evelyn's tear-streaked face haunted her, the old woman's plea. "She's all I have left," clashing with the crumpled article in her pocket, its edges digging into her hip like accusation. Fraud, debts, a life built on sand. And the attorneys, those 4 suits with their briefcases full of summonses, circling closer. The oven timer beeped insistently from the kitchen, a shrill reminder yanking her to her feet. She shuffled in, silencing it with a jab, the casserole bubbling over the edges of the dish, cheese blackened and acrid in the air. She scraped it into the trash, the spatula scraping ceramic with a harsh grind that matched the grit in her chest. Water from the tap ran icy over her hands as she rinsed the dish, the suds foaming white and slick, but her mind churned. Expose it, save Clara at the cost of everything? Or silence? letting the secret rot until it poisoned them all? Noah's laughter from earlier echoed faintly, a ghost in the empty rooms, pulling her toward the safe choice, distance, normalcy. But the moral snare tightened, Evelyn's warning about her boy now a double-edged blade. Sleep evaded her that night, the bed a tangle of sheets damp with sweat, the ceiling fan whirring overhead like accusatory whispers. Moonlight slanted through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the walls, and every creak from next door. The house settling or Clara shifting in her fevered haze, jolted her upright heart slamming. By dawn, the sky lightened to a watery gray, birdsong piercing the quiet with mocking cheer, and Emily rose, her body heavy as lead. Coffee brewed strong, the bitter steam curling up to sting her nostrils, but she sipped it mechanically, staring out at Evelyn's yard where dew clung to the wild roses like tears. Noah stirred at 7, his footsteps padding down the hall, small and trusting. "Mom, you look tired. Bad dreams." He climbed onto a stool at the counter, legs swinging, his pajamas rumpled and smelling faintly of sleep-warmed cotton. She forced a smile, plating toast slathered in peanut butter, the knife spreading it thick and sticky. "Just work stuff, buddy. Eat up, big day at school." His chatter filled the space, tales of math tests and recess heroes, but her nods were automatic, eyes flicking to the window where Evelyn's curtains twitched once, a pale hand pulling them aside before vanishing. No knock came, no plea for breakfast, just the weight of unspoken complicity hanging between the houses. Dropping Noah at school felt like fleeing a battlefield, the bus's brakes squealing as she waved goodbye, his face pressed to the glass with a grin that twisted her insides. Back home, the catering order loomed. A salad for the barbecue, greens wilting slightly in the crisper. But her hands trembled chopping cucumbers, the blade slipping once, nicking her thumb. Blood welled bright and coppery, a sharp sting that grounded her, and she bandaged it under running water, the mirror reflecting hollow eyes ringed with fatigue. By mid-morning, resolve hardened like cooling wax. She couldn't bury this alone. The dilemma clawed too deep, a moral chasm widening with every imagined what-if. Noah exposed, Evelyn evicted, Clara dying in silence. Grabbing her phone, the screen cracked from a long-ago drop. She dialed Detective Ruiz. The number from his card burned into her memory. It rang twice before his voice answered, calm and gravelly over the line's faint static. "Ruiz here. It's Emily Harper. About Evelyn Thorne. I need to talk. In person." Her words tumbled out, voice steady despite the quake in her chest, the kitchen clock ticking loudly behind her. A pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Come down to the station. Now." No questions, just the weight of inevitability. The drive blurred, suburbs giving way to the city's edge, the Civic's tires humming over potholes that jarred her bones. The station was a squat concrete bunker, rain from last night pooling in the lot, the air inside thick with stale coffee and printer toner. Ruiz met her in a windowless interview room, the table scarred and sticky under her elbows, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. He was alone, mustache twitching as he poured her water from a cooler, the plastic cup sweating condensation onto the formica. "Spill it," he said, settling across from her, notebook open, pen poised. His eyes, dark and unreadable, pinned her like a specimen. Emily's mouth went dry, the water tasting metallic on her tongue. She started slow, the meals, the stories, the welfare check, building to the basement, Clara's return, the fraud clipping she'd found. Words poured out, halting at first, then rushing like the rain. The article unfolded on the table between them, its folds creased from her pocket. Ruiz's pen scratched steadily, face impassive, but his jaw tightened at tuberculosis. A flicker of something, concern, alarm, crossing his features. "You're sure about the illness?" He leaned forward, the chair creaking under his weight, the room's air growing stuffier, laced with his aftershave, sharp and piney. "I heard her. Seen the fever through the door crack once. Sweating, shaking." Emily's voice cracked, hands clasping the cup until it dented. "Evelyn's hiding her to protect her, but it's killing her. And now those attorneys, if they're tied to the fraud." Ruiz nodded, closing the notebook with a snap that echoed off the cinder-block walls. "We'll check it out. Quietly. You did right coming in." He stood, the motion abrupt, and escorted her out, the hallway's fluorescent hum following them like a drone. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, glaring off the wet pavement, but Emily felt no warmth, only the hollow ache of betrayal. Not Evelyn's, but her own, the neighborly bond severed by necessity. Back home by lunch, the house empty and echoing, she collapsed on the couch, the cushions sagging under her, fabric worn soft from years of Noah's leaps. The phone stayed silent. No call from Ruiz, no frantic knock from next door, but tension coiled tighter, a spring wound to breaking. She prepped dinner mechanically, ground turkey browning in the skillet with a sizzle that released savory spices, onions caramelizing to a sweet edge, but her appetite was gone, the smells turning cloying. Noah arrived home chattering about art class, clay under his nails gritty and gray, and she listened with half an ear, hugging him close, inhaling the clean scent of his shampoo mingled with schoolyard dust. Bedtime came early, his stories winding down to yawns, the book's pages turning with a soft rustle. Alone again, Emily sat by the window, the night deepening to velvet black, stars pricking through the overcast. A van's headlights swept the street, black, familiar, slowing at Evelyn's curb before accelerating away. Imagination or prelude? The uncertainty gnawed, her moral gamble now a live wire, sparking toward an explosion she could only wait for, the suburb's quiet facade cracking under the strain of buried truths. The hours after Emily's confession at the station stretched into an agonizing limbo, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds like accusatory bars, casting striped patterns across the kitchen floor that danced with every passing cloud. She moved through the house like a ghost, wiping counters that were already spotless, the lemon scent of the cleaner sharp and stinging in her nostrils, a futile attempt to scrub away the guilt clinging to her skin. The turkey from dinner sat half-eaten in the fridge, its juices congealing into a greasy film that she avoided touching, the savory aroma now soured by nausea. Noah's laughter from the living room, cartoons blaring from the old TV, the tinny voices of animated heroes clashing with laser blasts, felt distant, a bubble of innocence she feared bursting. Her phone lay silent on the table, screen dark and mocking. No buzz from Ruiz, no update on the raid or welfare check that would surely follow. Emily's fingers itched to call Evelyn, to warn her, but the detective's parting words echoed, "Stay put. Interfering now makes you an accessory." Accessory. The word tasted like ash, bitter as the cold coffee she'd microwaved. The mug's handle warm, but the liquid inside gone tepid and flat. What if Clara died before they arrived? What if the exposure came too late, and Noah had already breathed in the tainted air during one of his backyard romps, chasing a stray ball over the fence? The moral chasm she'd leaped yawned wider, regret gnawing at her resolve. Had kindness demanded silence, Or had duty forced her hand? She pressed her forehead to the cool window glass, fogging it with her breath, watching Evelyn's house where curtains remained drawn. A single cat silhouetted on the sill, its tail flicking like a metronome of dread. By evening, the tension coiled tighter, the suburb's hush broken only by the distant rumble of thunder rolling in from the west, the air thickening with ozone and the promise of another storm. Noah tugged at her sleeve as she plated macaroni and cheese, the noodles steaming in their orange sauce, cheddar melting gooey and familiar. "Mom, you're spacing out again. Wanna play catch after?" His eyes, bright and trusting, mirrored the boy she'd shielded from Mark's abandonment, from the lean months of ramen dinners and whispered reassurances. She ruffled his hair, forcing a laugh that scraped her throat. "Rain's coming, buddy. How about board games instead? Monopoly, I'll let you be the banker." He beamed, scampering off to set up the board on the coffee table, pieces clattering like tiny dice of fate. But as they played, Emily's mind wandered to the basement next door. The damp concrete walls she'd glimpsed once through a cracked door, shelves of rusted tools and forgotten jars. Now a sick room where Clara wheezed for air. Evelyn's stories of her daughter's youth. Pigtails flying on a swing set, laughter like bells, clashed with the fraud clipping's stark truths. A woman who'd gambled lives for survival. Was Emily the villain here, trading one family's ruin for her own peace? The first raindrops pattered against the roof as thunder grumbled closer, vibrating the windows with a low growl. Lightning flashed, illuminating the yard in stark white, and Noah squealed, diving under the table for cover. Emily pulled him close, his small body warm and trembling against her. The scent of his soap, clean, boyish, grounding her amid the storm's fury. "It's okay, just noise," she murmured, stroking his back. But her own pulse raced, sinking with the wind whipping the oaks into a frenzy, branches scraping the siding like claws. The power flickered once, twice, plunging the room into shadow before steadying. The Monopoly board's colorful houses glowing faintly under the lamp's amber light. Then, headlights pierced the downpour, two sets, sweeping the street like searchlights. Emily's breath caught, her arms tightening around Noah as he peeked out, curiosity overriding fear. Cops? Cool. But her stomach plummeted as she recognized the lead car. A marked cruiser, blue lights pulsing silently through the rain-smeared glass, followed by an unmarked sedan, its tires hissing over the wet pavement. They pulled up to Evelyn's curb, doors slamming in unison, shadows unfolding into figures. Ruiz, unmistakable in his rain-slicked jacket, flanked by two uniforms and a woman in a white coat, medical insignia glinting. No sirens, but the authority was palpable, cutting through the storm like a blade. Noah wriggled free, pressing his nose to the window. "What's happening next door? Mrs. Thorne in trouble?" His voice was excited, innocent, but Emily's world narrowed to the scene unfolding. Ruiz knocking, the door opening after a long pause, Evelyn's frail form silhouetted, cane in hand, her protest lost to the thunder's roar. The group pushed inside, the door swinging shut with a finality that echoed in Emily's chest. Ambulance? No, but the medic's bag suggested intervention, quarantine gear, perhaps masks dangling from straps. She scooped Noah up, carrying him to his room despite his protests, the stairs creaking under their weight, rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof. "Bedtime story first, then we'll see," she lied, tucking him in with mechanical motions, the comforter's fleece soft against his cheeks. His eyes drooped quickly, lulled by the storm's lullaby, but Emily lingered, watching his chest rise and fall, each breath a silent prayer. No coughs, no fever. Downstairs, she paced, the carpet muffling her steps, the air heavy with petrichor seeping through cracks, mingling with the faint mildew from the basement flood last spring. Minutes bled into an hour, the storm easing to a steady pour, lightning now sporadic flashes that lit Evelyn's windows like revelations. Voices filtered through the walls. Muffled shouts, a woman's cry sharp and anguished. Evelyn's? Clara's? Emily's hand hovered over the phone, dialing Ruiz's number before hanging up, the moral dilemma twisting anew. Rush over, demand answers, or wait, letting the authorities unravel the knot she'd tied. An unexpected shift came with a knock at her door. Soft, hesitant, not the authoritative rap of police. Heart slamming. She opened it to find Sergeant Patel, drenched and somber, water dripping from her hood onto the mat. "Ms. Harper," Patel said, voice low over the rain's patter, her breath visible in the cool night air. "Ruiz sent me. This complicated. Clara's out, stable, but they're transporting her to isolation at Cook County. Evelyn's resisting, talking about rights, the cats. But there's more." She glanced back at the house, where lights blazed now, shadows moving like specters. Those attorneys? They weren't fraud chasers. Family. Clara's half-brother and his team, long lost, from Harlan's side. They showed up today with proof. Evelyn's got a will leaving everything to Clara, but the cabin's clean, inheritance legit. The debts were a bluff to force contact. Clara reached out to them too, scared of dying alone. Emily staggered back, the doorframe rough under her grip, the revelation hitting like lightning. Not sharks, but kin. The buried story a tangled web of reconciliation, not ruin. Relief warred with fresh uncertainty. Had she accelerated a family mending, or shattered Evelyn's fragile control? Clara alive, treated. Evelyn facing exposure, her cats perhaps scattered. What now? Emily whispered, the rain's chill raising gooseflesh on her arms. Patel squeezed her shoulder, the touch brief and wet. Charges pending for concealment, endangerment. But it's mercy mostly. You gave her a chance. She turned away, vanishing into the night, leaving Emily with the storm's fading rumble and a heart suspended in anxious limbo. The pre-dawn light hinting at consequences yet to unfold, her choices echoing in the quiet house like unanswered thunder. The rain tapered to a fine mist as dawn crept over Elmwood Heights, painting the rooftops in muted silvers and grays. The air heavy with the scent of soaked asphalt and blooming night jasmine that clung stubbornly to the fences. Emily stood frozen in her doorway, Sergeant Patel's words looping in her mind like a scratched record. Mercy, chance, charges. The street was empty now. The cruiser and sedan long vanished into the night, but Evelyn's house pulsed with activity. Windows aglow, shadows shifting like uneasy spirits behind the curtains. A low wail pierced the quiet. Not thunder, but something human, raw and keening, carrying on the damp breeze. Clara? Evelyn? Emily's chest tightened, the moral scales tipping wildly. She'd unleashed this, her confession a key turning in a lock she couldn't unturn. She couldn't stay put. Noah still slept, his breaths even through the cracked bedroom door. But the pull next door was magnetic, a tether forged from shared meals and whispered secrets. Slipping on her rain jacket, the nylon slick and cold against her skin, Emily crossed the yard, her bare feet numb on the wet grass, blades slicing like tiny accusations. The porch light buzzed faintly at Evelyn's door, which hung ajar now, spilling warm lamplight onto the steps. She pushed inside without knocking, the hinges groaning like a sigh, the air inside thick with the metallic tang of medical gear and the underlying musk of fear sweat. The living room was chaos. Cats scattered in hissing confusion, one tabby arching its back on the mantel, another darting under the couch with a yowl. Evelyn slumped in her armchair, wrists cuffed loosely behind her. Precaution, not malice. The silver locket dangling open against her chest, Clara's curl of hair glinting like a talisman. Her face was a map of devastation, eyes swollen and red, silver hair undone in wild strands that framed her like a halo of defeat. Beside her, on a stretcher wheeled in by paramedics in hazmat suits, lay Clara, emaciated, oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath, her skin sallow under the fluorescent glare. For lines snaked into her arms, dripping saline that beaded on the floor like tears, and her eyes, fever-bright and sunken, locked onto Emily's with a mix of gratitude and betrayal. "You?" Evelyn rasped, her voice cracking like dry timber, the cane discarded in the corner like a fallen soldier. "You called them, after everything. No venom, just exhaustion." The words heavy with the weight of decades buried and unearthed. A paramedic adjusted Clara's mask, the plastic hissing softly, filling the room with a sterile rhythm that drowned the cat's meows. Emily knelt beside the stretcher, the carpet damp under her knees, her hand hovering over Clara's before touching her fingers. Cool, fragile, veins prominent like rivers on a map. "I had to. For her. For you." Tears blurred her vision, hot and unbidden, the scent of antiseptic clashing with the faint, lingering sweetness of the soup she'd brought days ago. Clara's gaze softened, a weak squeeze of her hand conveying what words couldn't. "Thank you, or forgive me, or both." The unexpected shift hit Emily like a wave. Kin, not enemies. The attorneys revealed as bridges, not blades. But the dilemma roared. Evelyn's life unraveling, cats to shelters, a fraud past that might still bite, all because of her meddling heart. Ruiz entered then, his boots thudding heavily, mustache beaded with rain, eyes weary under the brim of his cap. "Ms. Harper, should have known you'd show." He uncuffed Evelyn gently, her wrists marked red, rubbing them absently as if the metal still bit. "Clara's stable, TB confirmed, but treatable. Families en route from the city, they'll handle the legal. Inheritances clean, debts settled years back. Bluff to draw her out." He nodded toward Clara, who managed a faint nod, the mask muffling her cough into a subdued rattle. The room seemed to exhale, tension uncoiling like a spring released, but Evelyn's sob broke it, deep, guttural, echoing off the walls cluttered with memories. Emily rose, pulling Evelyn into an embrace, the old woman's frame brittle against her, bones sharp through the nightgown's thin cotton. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, inhaling the familiar citrus soap mingled now with hospital bleach. "But she's alive. That's the legacy. The stories don't end buried." Evelyn clung, shoulders shaking, the cats circling their feet in wary truce, one ginger purring against Emily's ankle as if sensing the pivot from fracture to fragile mend. The paramedics wheeled Clara out, the stretcher's wheels rumbling over the threshold into the misty morning. Ruiz following with murmured assurances of minimal charges. Endangerment, a fine, community service for Evelyn, her cats vetted and returned. The door clicked shut, leaving Emily and Evelyn in the quiet aftermath, sunlight breaking through clouds to slant golden across the floor, dust motes swirling like confetti in the beams. Weeks blurred into a tentative normalcy, the suburb healing its scars under autumn's crisp advance. Emily's kitchen hummed again, pots simmering with stews rich in rosemary and thyme, the scents wafting through open windows to Evelyn's porch, where the old woman now sat with fewer cats. 6. The rest rehomed but promised visits. Clara recovered in a city ward, letters arriving weekly, her handwriting strengthening. Tales of the cabin's quiet lakeside now laced with plans for a fresh start. The attorneys, brothers, uncles had brokered peace, the inheritance a nest egg for care, debts dissolved in family forgiveness. Emily watched Noah kick a soccer ball in the yard, his laughter bright against the falling leaves, the air alive with wood smoke from neighborhood fires. No coughs shadowed him, no fevers. The tests had come clean. Evelyn waved from her swing. A shared meal plate balanced on her lap, lasagna, Emily's recipe, cheese bubbling warm. Their eyes met, a nod passing between them. Stories unearthed, not buried, binding them tighter than before. In the quiet evenings, as crickets sang their final chorus, Emily felt the weight lift, her choices a bridge from isolation to connection. The crazy cat lady now just Evelyn. Neighbor, survivor, kin in the weave of suburban lives. Hey, what did you think of how it all came together? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Did Emily make the right call? If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more tales like this. Your support means the world. Epilogue. Months later, under a winter sun that glittered off fresh snow blanketing Maple Street, Emily stood at the window, stirring cocoa on the stove, the rich chocolate scent curling through the house like a promise. Noah dashed outside with Evelyn, building a snowman amid the cat's paw prints, laughter mingling with the crunch of boots. Clara visited weekends, her cough a faint echo, helping in the kitchen with hands steady now, sharing recipes from her travels, spicy moles and fresh salsas that spiced their meals. The bungalow felt fuller, the loneliness cooked away in shared warmth, legacies no longer hidden but savored, one bite at a time.